Throughout history, we see people who are put down because of their race, ethnicity, religion, or some other trait that distinguishes them from the rest. It is as if they are being punished for the very things that make them individuals. What's wrong with a little individuality? Why has it become an essential part of our being to want to be accepted by others or someone in authority? Instead of being seen and recognized for our unique qualities as individuals, we would rather be accepted and blend in with the rest of the crowd. This longing for acceptance is partially the reason why we are so willing to submit to the will of others, especially those in authority. We are easily coerced to follow whatever the dominant person, ideas, and things around us are, because we would rather be followers than our own individual selves. I fear that this tendency to follow the crowd and the loss of individuality can actually have devastating effects on our nation and its society. The natural human need to be accepted and be a part of something is what makes people follow whatever the prevailing dominant person or group around them is. This individual sacrifice of oneself for the sake of blending in with the majority is the source of many crimes and problems within our world today. More and more people are abandoning their individuality so that they can be accepted and feel an association with another person or group of people. We need to regain our sense of individuality because it is the one thing that may be able to stand in the way of wrongdoing. Every human wants to be part of something and feel as if they have a place in the world. People bond based upon similarities and are divided based upon differences. Doing things based upon whether or not others are doing it is also part of our human nature, and we naturally want to fit in and be accepted. But what if this natural tendency to conform makes us susceptible to committing acts of wrongdoing? This is the case in Stanley Milgram's 1961 experiment, in which a person was a teacher and the other was the learner. And the learner had to memorize and remember a series of words. And the teacher was then prompted by the leader of the experiment to shock the learner every time they got the answer wrong. The voltage of the shock increased with every answer that the learner didn't get right, and the teacher was forced to hear the learner's painful screams every time the shock voltage increased. Throughout this experiment, the teacher never knew that the learner was not really getting shocked, but was actually just an actor that was faking the screams. One act automatically assumes that the teacher would have stopped after hearing the learner's first screams, but the teacher actually kept raising the voltage level simply because the leader of the experiment kept telling him to. The teacher's willingness to follow the experiment leader's orders brings to light many things about the relationship between an individual and the majority/authority. Although we may sometimes feel as though we have no choice but to obey an authority, Erich Fromm seems to suggest that this is not true. Our fear of being lonely or ostracized or of facing other unpleasant consequences may seem to force us to choose obedience. But while we may not like the choices we face, we always have the option of being disobedient. If we are willing to face the consequences of our disobedience and give up the security and protection of our obedience provides. This fear of being lonely and ostracized is what leads us to a person's de-individuation. De-individuation describes a person's willingness to sacrifice their individual self or beliefs in order to be in association with and accepted by others. Unfortunately, this willingness to do anything for acceptance is a source of many of our society's problems. A perfect example of this can be seen in fraternities and sororities. People join fraternities and sororities to be a part of a brotherhood or sisterhood and to feel as if they are part of something. But when did people become so desperate to become part of something that they were willing to do anything to feel accepted? Hazing has become an increasing problem within fraternities and sororities, and Matthew Carrington was pledging for his school's fraternity when his fraternity leaders took things too far. Carrington and another pledge were forced to do calisthenics in raw sewage as they drank from a 5-gallon jug of water that was filled over and over again, which led them to urinate and vomit on themselves repeatedly. Matthew eventually collapsed and started having a seizure when his heart eventually stopped once he reached the hospital. At 5 a.m., he was pronounced dead from water intoxication, which was the source of the swelling of his brain and lungs. Even though this was a very unfortunate hazing incident, what bothered me the most was the absence of Matthew's fraternity brothers when he needed them the most. Reports say that they did not initially called the ambulance when Matthew started seizing, and what was even more disturbing was the fact that not a single fraternity brother was at the hospital with him in the last few moments of his life. It is sad that the goal behind joining this fraternity was to find brotherhood, but in Matthew's case, the brotherhood abandoned him when he needed them the most. So is it even worth it in the end?